For survivor testimony, people who survived the attack or who were in the home that night reported seeing a masked man. Their statements provided eyewitness detail that contributed to the investigation and to the grand jury proceedings. Taken together, these items formed a chain of circumstantial and physical evidence that authorities said pointed to a single individual. The defense responded aggressively. They filed motions to suppress the DNA evidence, arguing the forensic genealogy search was unlawful or improperly authorized, and they challenged the scope and execution of search warrants. They questioned the reliability and interpretation of phone tower data and raised issues about chain of custody and potential contamination. There were also motions and public filings that attempted to scrutinize the victims' backgrounds, efforts critics described as victim smearing, and several of those lines of attack were curtailed by the judge during pretrial proceedings. These pretrial battles are central because many of the prosecution's claims rely on scientific methods that the defense can attack: the admissibility of genealogy leads, the precision of cell data, and the weight to be given eyewitness testimony obtained under traumatic conditions. Expect expert witnesses on both sides: forensic genealogists, DNA analysts, cell data specialists, and criminologists to play major roles at trial. Beyond the technical disputes, the case has been consumed by public theories. Online forums and social media filled with speculation. Was this a targeted attack? A drug deal gone wrong? A hazing or interpersonal dispute? Police repeatedly pushed back on rumors, emphasizing that the known evidence did not support many of the theories circulating online. Meanwhile, the community in Moscow mourned deeply. Candlelight vigils were held, scholarships were created in the victims' names, and the campus grappled with grief. Survivors and the fifth roommate have been important witnesses in the grand jury and pretrial process. Their testimony, along with physical evidence and digital records, helped the prosecution secure an indictment. Now the system moves toward a courtroom resolution. The trial is scheduled for 2025. Here are the key things to watch as this case unfolds. DNA reliability debates, how the forensic genealogy lead was developed and whether that method and the downstream testing will be admitted and accepted by the jury. The interpretation of stalking and premeditation. Prosecutors will try to show repeated presence and surveillance. The defense will argue alternate explanations. The degree to which repeated phone pings and vehicle sightings prove intent will be hotly contested. The role of expert testimony. The jury will hear competing experts on DNA, cell tower analysis, and forensic timelines. How credible those experts prove to be could swing the case. Pre-trial publicity and jury selection. With intense national attention, both sides may push for venue changes or special voir dire to find an impartial jury. Penalty phase issues if convicted. The question of a death penalty sentence introduces another set of legal and factual disputes about aggravating circumstances and mitigation. At the heart of this story are 4 lives lost: Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana, and a community forever changed. No procedural win or legal technicality erases that loss. The courts will now take the facts, the evidence, and the arguments from both sides and decide whether the prosecution has proved guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. As we wait for the trial, the public conversation will continue. Debates about privacy and forensic genealogy, questions about how digital footprints are used in criminal cases, and broader discussions about campus safety and violence prevention. What do you think? Subscribe for updates as the case develops. And please keep the families of the victims in your thoughts. Stay informed. Stay safe. Picture this: a quiet college town shattered overnight. November 13th, 2022. 4 University of Idaho students were found brutally murdered in their home. The case that followed would captivate the nation and spark heated debates online. Today, we break down the full timeline, the evidence, and what's next in the case against Bryan Kohberger. Critical note: Kohberger has pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent until proven guilty. This true crime story is a real crime case which uses only publicly reported, verified information. At 11:58 p.m. on November 12th, the 4 victims were out that night: Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Maddie Mogan, and Xana Kernodle. By 8 a.m. the following morning, their bodies were discovered in a Moscow, Idaho home at 1112 King Road. They had been stabbed repeatedly with a large knife. There was no forced entry reported at the time. 2 other roommates and 1 guest survived on the lower floor of the house. They were reportedly unaware anything had happened until the next morning. The victims were all in their early 20s. Ethan was a recreation major from Washington. Kaylee was a marketing student poised to begin an internship. Maddie was studying elementary education. Xana was a sorority member who loved travel. For young lives extinguished in the place they called home, the investigation began immediately. Hundreds of tips poured in, neighbors, students, and strangers all contacting law enforcement. Police released an image of a white Hyundai Elantra spotted near the scene in the early morning hours. Investigators conducted more than 300 interviews. FBI forensic teams were brought in to comb the house for evidence. Among the items recovered, a knife sheath found beneath one of the victims became a crucial physical lead. Forensic testing returned male DNA on that sheath, and investigators used that sample as a key part of their search. Cell tower data also showed a phone connecting repeatedly near the victim's home in the hours before the murders, an indication that someone had been present and possibly watching. For weeks the probe stretched across state lines. Law enforcement pieced together leads, followed up on sightings, and trawled the miles of phone and video data. On December 30th, police made a major arrest. Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD criminology student at Washington State University, a school only about 10 miles from the University of Idaho campus, was taken into custody in Pennsylvania. The white Hyundai Elantra tied to the investigation matched the vehicle authorities had been searching for. Public reporting indicated that DNA evidence linked Kohberger to the knife sheath, and investigators also reviewed cell phone location data that placed him near the victim's home on multiple occasions in the months before the attack. Taken together, investigators described the pattern as more than a chance presence. They considered evidence of planning rather than a spontaneous act. Kohberger was extradited to Idaho and formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. He entered a not guilty plea. Bail was denied. Prosecutors signaled they would seek the death penalty, and the defense assembled legal teams preparing extensive challenges. So what exactly tied investigators to their suspect? Let's break down the core pieces of evidence that have been highlighted in public reporting. 1. The sheath DNA. Investigators used forensic genealogy techniques to analyze the DNA profile recovered from the knife sheath. Forensic genealogy, the same general approach used in high-profile cases like the Golden State Killer, involves comparing an unknown DNA profile against public genealogy databases to find distant relatives, then building a family tree to narrow toward an identity. Prosecutors say that process produced a lead that ultimately led them to Kohberger, and subsequent laboratory testing linked his DNA to the sheath. 2. Phone pings. Public reports show a phone associated with the suspect connected to cell towers near the victim's home at 2:47 a.m. And then again, there was a recorded connection at 4:48 a.m. Phone tower data can place a device in a general area and show patterns of presence over time. It is not as precise as GPS, but can strongly corroborate other evidence when timestamps and patterns line up. 3. Vehicle sightings. Neighbors and camera footage reportedly captured a white sedan circling the neighborhood before and after the attack. Investigators pursued these leads and identified vehicles matching that description, tying the reports into the broader timeline.